folks, and welcome back to the show. It's James again, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much everyone for your fantastic patience in me not making anything for probably the best part of 6 or 7 months, and this is the first substantial video I've made in quite a long time. And this video is kind of like an update sort of thing, and like me getting back into the swing of things, and I'll talk about like what's been going on, like why I haven't made anything for quite a long time, and what you can expect to see from me, like me getting back into the swing of things, making video logs and getting back into making videos again for you guys. So yes, as I say, hopefully everyone's had a decent 2017, and you've had a nice, you had a bunch of nice presents from Santa Claus, jolly old Saint Nick, and you've had a good Happy New Year, like getting into January 1st, and everything's been tickety-boo. For me, 2017 has been a bit an up and down, really, for me. That's mainly the reason why I haven't done anything for a very long time, actually. I don't want to spend too long on it because you know, like I don't want to like ramble on for too long. But I ramble on for far too long on everything, basically. But 2017, early 2017, I had to, for various reasons, I had to leave my full-time employment job. I had to leave that, and I was basically unemployed for quite a long time, actually, for several months after that. I was doing like part-time work for here and there, bits and pieces for different people, but I wasn't actually full-time employment until quite recently, actually. And then I think it was about 3 months ago, I joined an agency, and through that agency, thankfully they found me full-time employment. I've done my little agency contract, and now I'm with the same company full-time now. So completely different industry, different colleagues, new outlook, and like it's a lot more positive environment, and actually I think I'm doing all right there. So things are I've settled down again, and that's why while I was trying to get all that sorted, I just didn't really have, you know, the time or the I really couldn't focus on making videos anyway, because like my head was just in a totally different place, and I had to try and get that sorted before, like I had to, you know, YouTube had to take a sort of back seat, video making in general to take a back seat to, because life, as it were, got in the way, let's just say. But yes, that's I think pretty much everything's settled down now, and like 2018, like I've actually gotten settled, and currently got a bit of time off at the moment, so I thought let's get back into making the videos and like actually get things rolling again. I thought like 2018, brand new start, new video, and like I'll try and get a new vlog out to you guys at least once a week. I don't know what timetable I'm going to go with yet, but as I say, I'm still working on that. And if you follow me for a long time anyway, you know I'm quite disorganised, that sort of thing anyway. Always terrible at these vlogs. My throat's always like goes really dry after about 5 minutes. But anyway, I thought I'd like to spend this first vlog of the year talking about like these vlogs will be talking about gaming topics and things like that. I'd like to talk in this video log about video game collecting, and why people do it and why I do it, and perhaps I'll give you guys some pointers as well, like as to what sort of things you should look out for, like what any advice I could give you, because I've got like ever since I've gotten back into full-time employment now, like I've been getting back into retro video games and video game collecting again, like I used to do. And there's different reasons why would you want to actually like still collect these old video games? Like what's the point of collecting stuff like Super Nintendo, N64, Mega Drive, and all the other great consoles of the past? What's the point of collecting these cartridges and discs and things when you can just like emulate everything these days? Well, there's several reasons why you may want to decide to prefer to use the original hardware as opposed to downloading a bunch of ROMs off the internet and playing them on your computer or laptop or a tablet or whatever you've got, or your mobile phone even. For me, it's more to do with the authenticity, I suppose. It's like playing on something has to be said about playing on the original hardware with the original controllers, as the game was originally intended to be played, and played on the original hardware, like as it was, 100% accurate as it was, with no emulation inaccuracies, because you're playing on the original hardware. Now, emulators have pros and cons, as do playing on the original hardware. Emulators do have their place, and like I'm not one of those people who take like a hard line stance against piracy. Like there's different reasons why people would prefer to just pirate everything, just download ROMs without paying for it and all that other stuff. But that's a topic for another video, I think. But I'm not really that kind of person. There's people, download things for free for different reasons, and I'm not that kind of person who takes a hard line stance against it. I certainly used to, but not these days, because there's like, it's not piracy sort of as a subcategory. It's not that quite clear cut as it once was. Like for example, you might take a stance against some like a company's like development or attitudes to development, or you might take a stance against like DLC, or you don't like a company charging microtransactions. All sorts of reasons why you want to pirate a game as opposed to like paying through Steam or what have you. I'm not really that kind of guy. I do use emulators myself from time to time, but I always prefer to play on the original hardware, simply because emulators can be a bit hit and miss. To be fair, a lot of them these days are pretty good actually. Like a lot of the old retro consoles like Super Nintendo and Nintendo Entertainment System and Mega Drive, they're emulated pretty well these days. You've got like SNES 9X, that's quite a good one, Z SNES, and you've got Nesta was a decent one if I remember correctly for NES, but I haven't used that in a while actually. But I remember that being working fairly well back in the day. Nestopia's another one, I think. I can't think of any Mega Drive ones off the top of my head. But anyway, for the ones I've tried anyway, they tend to work quite well. But others, not so much. There are some other consoles, especially like the later 3D ones, which are quite difficult to emulate, and some games work better than others. Like N64, some of the main games work okay, like and stuff like Project 64 and Moopin 64, but some of the less obscure ones just don't boot up at all, or they just don't work properly. And as is the case with something like the Sega Dreamcast, that emulator hasn't been updated for several years, especially the main one anyway, and it hasn't worked properly for quite a long time. And development sort of like tapered off, and like a lot of the developers just left to do other things. It's just one of those things. It's just not all console emulators are treated equal, let's just put it that way. And emulators, it's so easy to just download a bunch of ROMs and just like, play them as they were, and on your computer, which you can do if you want to, but it's the inaccuracies that tend to get me. Like sometimes you get like problems with the sound, or problems with the input, or problems with the visuals, like you get glitches, or just the game just doesn't work properly at all, depending on what you're trying to play. That's the advantage that using original hardware has over using emulators and things. But of course, the problem with like using the original hardware is like mainly not so much with the hardware itself. It's more to do with the display that you're using, and like with it being 2018 now, of course, that pretty much 95% of people have now got these flashy high definition displays or ultra high definition displays. And the trouble with using these old consoles is a lot of these fancy flat screen panels and displays, they're not very good at processing these analog signals that like the vast majority of these retro consoles output. Now there's different ways of trying to overcome that. The biggest problem is that using these displays the biggest issue is not so much the picture quality itself. It's more to do with a lot of these fancy like process frame interpolation, I think it's called, these fancy video processing effects which works great on stuff like Blu-rays and like television programs. They add input lag. So for example, when you press a button like, I don't know, Mario might like jump a little bit later than you expect him to than he would on like a retro CRT display, so which is pretty much virtually no lag pretty much. There's different ways you can overcome it. There's some displays like you can turn those effects off to reduce the lag, like game mode is a popular one on Samsung TVs for example. And of course it also depends on the cables you can use. You can also which is the more expensive route you can do, is that you can modify your consoles to a certain extent to use digital cable standards rather than analog standards, but that's probably another topic for another video. but yes, I like using the original consoles because of the accuracy. Like you don't get any graphical, like they play as they were, as intended, and you don't get these weird like graphical glitches and what have you. And I just like having the original hardware, something to play, and I like using the original controllers. And that's not always the case. You can't always do that with using emulators, at least not without using like special adapters and what have you. Do apologise, my throat is absolutely killing me, so I'm just drinking water from time to time. So yeah, there's pros and cons to using original hardware or using emulators. Now, of course, so if you've got the original consoles, which vast majority I have got them all set up, you're going to need games to play on them, of course, and like you can still rely on your old cartridges and discs and stuff, so you can bring them all down from the loft where you've got them and have them on display. Now I have recently been going through them, and out of shot I have got pretty much all of my game discs and cartridges, my Super Nintendo, my N64 cartridges, all on a nice brand new bookcase, all displayed nicely, and I've got my Game Boy games in the middle and PlayStation below that and all that stuff. So I've got all my games all there ready to go. But of course, another problem with using original hardware is if you're getting back into I want to try, for example, Castlevania 4 or something, and you want to try out these really cool games that you don't have in your collection. You might have sold them years ago, or you just can't find them. So this is where game collecting comes in. I've been it's a hobby of mine recently. I've been been collecting properly for about 2 or 3 months now. Basically, I think getting back into it. Looking into different ways to try and save money, like collecting these old games again. Once you've got all your consoles all set up, ready to go, hooked up, and you want to get the original cartridges if you can, and get the original discs if you can. So, as of course, there's things for example, you can use things like flashcards, for example. That is so you can still use the original hardware. Now, that is an expensive route of going about it. I would demonstrate this to you. This is an SD2 SNES. This is one of the more advanced ones you can get, where basically you can put your ROMs on your SD card, and it will pretty much the vast majority of the games in the Super Nintendo library are available to you. You just put them all on there, and you can play them on the original hardware. Now, of course, you can say again, you go into the piracy route again, like you just saying about 5 minutes ago, you don't like piracy and all that. But mainly, I bought this SD to SNES because basically I like to try and preserve my cartridges and things like that, and all the ones that are especially quite difficult and expensive and hard to find these days. I'd rather have an alternative where I could just have the original on the shelf, whereas I can use this in its place and just boot up the ROM and off I go. The piracy route, of course, you can use these for piracy. Of course, you just download the ROMs and play them as they were, but it's not. if you're going to pirate the games, that's not the cheapest way to go about it. Not by a long shot. This, especially the SD to SNES, anyway. This is arguably the most advanced, at least at the moment, flash card you can get. For the Super Nintendo anyway. You can get the American version. This is the PAL version with the rounded cartridge. You can get the rectangular version for the NTSC version. But basically, that flash cart basically supports more chip mappers that was used on the Super Nintendo. Like, for example, a lot of cartridges use special chips to get them to work properly, like additional processing power, and allows the Super Nintendo to have extra graphical effects and all that bits and pieces. This one supports the vast majority of them. The only one that doesn't support, at least as of yet, is the Super Effects family of chips. Unfortunately, I can't play stuff like Star Fox as it's known over here, but Star Fox and Yoshi's Island. Yes, Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island also uses a version of the Super Effects chip, if I remember correctly. So I can't play those two games, but I've got the cartridges anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But that's the entire point of it. So one of these will set you back, this version anyway. You can get more fancy versions, but this is £150. This guy is saved up for it for quite a while actually. But I can, for the vast majority for all intents and purposes, is available to me to play. So if your intention is to pirate the games and play them on the hardware, if the idea is just to pirate things and not save money, then just go the emulator route, just have a computer and just play it on a laptop. That's the far cheaper way of doing it. But that's why flash carts, most vast majority of people anyway who decide to buy these, don't buy them for means of piracy. Most people that I find tend to be in the realms of the hands of collectors or enthusiasts, because if you're going to spend a lot of several £100s on a really expensive flash cart just to pirate games, and like you've done it completely wrong. Like if the idea is to save money and like pirate everything, then like download a free emulator on your laptop and just download the ROMs and like just get like a cheap controller and off you go. You're going completely the wrong way around if you're going like buying like a expensive flash cart for your console. But of course you can go that route, but like my intention is to source the original cartridges, which I'm doing at the moment, and put them on there on my cabinet over there. Keep them all stored, and I'll just use the SD to SNES in its place. Now, there's different flash cards available. There's the Super EverDrive, and there's various flavors of EverDrives for different consoles as well. But this one is one of the more expensive ones you can get, simply because it's the most compatible, at least at the moment, at the time, because it supports all the extra chips and whatnot that the Super EverDrive and other ones don't support. So you can play Super Mario Kart and like a lot of the Mega Man X games with this cartridge, but you can't with the Super EverDrive, I believe, if I remember correctly. So yes. Now, game collecting. Now, I'm quite fond of game collecting. There's different tips I can give you in terms of game collecting. Now, first things first, probably the first thing to do is, if you get into collecting, make sure you got all your consoles work. Basically, make sure you got like your setup up and running, and you're happy with it, and like you decide, yeah, this is the way to go. I'm going to go the retro console route. Make sure everything works. Some of your games work, your games cartridges work and stuff like that. Get yourself set up. And then number two, the second thing is, what sort of collection are you interested in, basically? So there's different kinds of collections now, depending on what console you intend to collect for. There's different like criteria you can go for, basically. Like what sort of collection. For example, are you just going to go for cartridges, or are you going to go for, if I could find one to hand I would show you, but anyway, like, or are you interested in having, for example, this is just a loose manual, but like, do you actually want the box as well? Do you want like the case as well, with all the manual and bits and pieces and what have you? The disc is in the console, by the way, but do you want like a complete in-box collection, or do you just want like the cartridges, or if you're a monster like on PlayStation, you just want the discs? Why would you ever want to do that? But anyway, it's entirely up to you. So decide what sort of collection you want to go for, like, and go from there, basically, and just work your way up gradually. Probably the best thing I can recommend to people is like, probably go for the mainstream titles first, like maybe ones that you know that are good and you haven't got yourself. Go for those ones first, simply because they're generally the most common and generally the easiest to get a hold of. Now, of course, you can either go for just the cartridge on its own, which is usually cheaper, or if you're going to be more hardcore, let's just quote unquote hardcore, whatever, you can go for what is known as complete in box, or CIB. Personally, I do a bit of both. Basically, I'll try and go for complete in box if I can, but as I say, like, complete in box is the more cost prohibitive route to go for, out of like as opposed to just cartridges only or discs only. But I prefer them because I like to try and get, as the game was sold, I like to try and get the original package and the manual and the disc and or cartridge with it as best as I can, and so as to say, like, I've got it complete and I can play it whenever I want. But as I say, that is the more expensive route than just saying, like, or just going, like, just grabbing the loose cartridge on its own. But I'm not keen on having loose cartridges. I'm not really, well, not because, like, I like to think, like, some people can be quite snobby about it, like, people just refuse just to buy cartridges on their own. I'm just not keen on having, like, loose cartridges. I don't know, for example, quote unquote, just on display on a shelf, simply because I'm not quite keen on having like exposed PCBs to the elements. I don't like having, you know, so as some people do. Some people like to just have them like on a shelf or a cartridge just lined up, a bunch of them on a shelf, where dust basically can like get inside the cartridges, and they don't last as long as opposed to if they were like inside like a protector or the original box. So that's why I don't like, if I get the cartridges on their own, I'll try and like wrap them up in a bit of plastic, so I'll put them in a bag for later. So what I like to do is, of course, I'm getting this in the wrong order. As I say, I like to get. I'll start with this. I like to get complete in box games. So that means the original box or package or packaging, plus the manual and the actual game itself, be it the cartridge or a disc or whatever it is. And then once I've got the complete game in box, I've got my Completionator account. For people who don't know what that is, it's just a site where you can keep track of all your games, and you can type in like what condition it's all in, everything. It's just basically like a collection, but it's kind of like similar to Backloggery. I think that's another example where you can just like keep track of all your games and write down any notes, like if you what you're looking to collect and like what you're missing and what have you. Put all your notes and everything on. It's just a nice organisation to it. So I update it on there and I put it on the shelf and it's all ready to go. And I can always look up it as a reference to see, oh, have I got that game? I'll type on the computer. And then I can find out, like, oh, do I need to get them, try and source a manual for that one or whatever, and what have you. So yeah, whenever possible, I'll try and source the complete in box. But as I say, that's not always possible. Depending on what kind of game it is, sometimes, for whatever reason, it's really difficult to get a hold of. Some of them are, and the downside is with complete in boxes, it's very expensive to do that a lot of the time. With retro game market as it is, you're going to come into contact with like people who just like play the market and scalp everything, which is really unfortunate. But that's just the way of the market at the moment, unfortunately. If a person knows a game is really rare, they'll jack the price up by about like 200-300% even in some cases, and just yeah, you're basically up against that. So what I'll try and do is with my games is, at least anyway, like very recently I've gone into my attic, and this is just an example, gone into my attic and like I found a bunch of, I've got a plastic bag here of all different bits and pieces. I've gone into my attic and basically collected all the loose cartridges and boxes and manuals I could find, so basically I could repackage everything I could, and any complete copies that I've like resalvaged, if you like, I put them all together and put them on a shelf and update my collection records and say that's complete. So for example, there's this one, Super Putty, which I don't know where the hell that I really have no idea how I've come into that. I've never had Super Putty, I've never had the game, but I don't know where this came from actually. I've got, for whatever reason, I've got the Super Putty manual for Super Nintendo. So in that sort of scenario, well, I've got the manual, so I've got to try and source the cartridge and the box if I can. So in that scenario, I'll look on eBay, try and source a cartridge. A lot of the time, that's a good tip is, if you're shopping on eBay, if you want a complete in box, it doesn't have to be all together at once. It can be in pieces. One seller might give you the game, while another seller might sell you the manual and the box, which that has happened in certain scenarios. So, and it works out cheaper. So if you're not bothered, if you're not picky about like the condition of certain things, of course the condition of games and boxes can vary. If you're not particularly that fussed and you just want the complete in box, you just want to put them all together, I like doing that because it's sort of a way, it's just kind of like recycling in a way, because like you're getting a loose cart on its own and you're getting a box from another place and putting them together, and there you are, there's another complete in box copy in circulation effectively. Even though it's in your collection, they will eventually go back into circulation once I eventually kick the bucket, I suppose. That's the one, and like it's recycling, like they go back in and like it's another complete copy in circulation basically, well, which will go in circulation anyway. So it's kind of like recycling in a way. So it's a good way to get complete games in box. Sometimes it works out cheaper, sometimes it doesn't, so watch out for that. But anyway, I've no idea how I've come across how I ended up with this, but I have incidentally ordered a full completed copy anyway, which I've got decent price. I think it was like £20. I think I've got one on order, complete in box copy of that. I have no idea if the game's any good or not. It's probably terrible, but it's complete nonetheless, and it will go on my shelf of games over there. So that's one way you can do it, and of course. You got to pay. Another thing you got to watch out for is, especially if you're on eBay, is you've got to watch out for fakes and things. Now, have I got a cartridge to show you guys? No, I haven't, unfortunately. I did have one. Thought I did, but that's me not preparing it properly. But of course, like, you got to watch out for fakes and stuff on eBay, depending on what the console you're collecting for is. Some consoles tend to suffer with fakes more than others. Like, for example, the Game Boy Advance platform is one you got to watch out for, especially if you're just in the market for buying loose cartridges, because a lot of those are because a lot of them in like the early to mid 2000s were pirated and like put onto pirated ROM cartridges, and some of them are quite difficult to spot as well. So you've got to pay attention to. You've got to pay attention for any fakes that are actually out there. In terms of like for example with GBA, there are different things you can do to try and quantify whether a cartridge is a fake. For example, GBA cartridges, you might have noticed, I've got like a little number on them. The official ones do, like a little number punched into the label, like usually with a 1 or a 2 followed with another number, like 20 or 21 or whatever, to tell you like what batch it's from. Now, a lot of the fake ones don't have that on there, so if you can see the number on there, then chances are that's a genuine article. In other instances, it's really easy to spot. Sometimes the label you printed on it is so desperately bad, it's unreal. I've tweeted some really bad ones. There's a really funny one though, where there's a Game Boy cartridge, Game Boy Advance cartridge with like the label had been ripped off. It might have been a genuine one, it might have been, but like, they drew a really crude picture of Mario on it, and like it just made me laugh my ass off because how bad the drawing was. I was tempted to buy it. I should have bought it actually. If I can find a picture of it, I'll put it up. But like, it was so funny. But like, it may well have been a fake. It may well have been a genuine, but I'm not sure. But like, there's different ways. Like, the label is a good way to check if the cartridge is fake or not. Like sometimes like the picture is too stretched too wide, or it uses like rating system pictures from like an incorrect region, for example. Like, that's another thing to look out for is you got to decide. Well, if you're picky, that is. Like, I'm quite picky when it comes to that. Like, for example, if I've got like a PAL box, I expect the PAL manual and PAL cartridge to be in there. I would not have the American cartridge to go with that, because that's not the right box. It's not the right manual. The manual very often has identifiers. Now, it is the case with a lot of Nintendo manuals. I don't know whether you can see that. There's like a little in the corner of the manual, it tells you the code. I don't know if you can see that, it's probably a bit too dark, but anyway. The identifier code tells you which region it's from. Now, a lot of the time the UK Nintendo games end in UKV, that's to denote it's the UK version, or sometimes it'll say EUR to denote it's from Europe. I think just if it's an American version, it will say US at the end. I think that's the denomination. But a lot of the cartridges that are fake don't have that denomination on there, and that's another identifier to let you know whether it's legit or not. So the best thing to do is, if you're not sure whether an item is fake, is I tend to like leave that listing. If I'm not 100% sure, I'll go for another one, even if like a listing is perhaps like £2 or £3 more than like one I was looking at previously. If I know that one is actually genuine, I'd rather pay a little bit extra to know, yeah, peace of mind, yeah, that's the original legit hardware, the original cartridge or disc or whatever. Disc-based games like PlayStation, you're not really going to have much trouble. Most of the, like for example, it's very easy to find a pirate disc, like to determine whether it's a pirated disc or not, because basically if it's printed on a CDR or whatever, like for PlayStation or a DVD-R, you can tell like by the colour of the disc at the bottom. You don't tend to see very often PlayStation games pirated, because it's just not worth. There's no money in it basically, because anyone could just download the ROM and burn it yourself. So there's not much point. But with cartridges with Nintendo cartridges, as with them being in vogue at the moment, like the Pirates decided to manufacture their own reproduction carts and fake carts. So best to keep an eye out on that one, folks. Keep a lookout for any fakes as best as you possibly can. But as I say, just keep your wits about you. In terms of cost, as I say, tend to go for the games that you know are really good first of all. Then, if you're feeling a bit more adventurous, start going a bit like for the more obscure and more sought after titles. Now, best thing to do with eBay is just be patient, basically. And like if you know you're up against like a bunch of scalpers, just leave it. Just forget that game for now, and then like try and find another game that you're trying to find in your collection. That's the best thing to do. Like, not encourage, not if you know deep down a game that they're charging way over the odds for it, then just don't pay for it. It's just simple as that. There's several instances where, like for example, a Super Nintendo game I've been after for ages or whatever. I think it was, which one was it now? I think, yeah, it was Indiana Jones Greatest Adventures, which is a great cartridge. A lot of the cartridges were like about £80–90, and but I waited for about 3 or 4 weeks. I think I was just biding my time until a more reasonable pricing listing came up, and I actually won that one and got it for about 50, I think, which is not too bad actually for the average price for that. So £50 or £90, that's a £40 saving right there, just because I waited a bit longer. So just bide your time, have a look round, check for fakes, of course. If something's too expensive, then just don't bother with it, really. The ones that tend to command the most prices tend to be. I'm just going to put the soundtrack back on. I'm currently listening to the Sims OST. If you can hear that in the background, just nice, relaxing music. Anyway, what was I saying? It was the. So yeah, as I said, yeah, be patient, be careful, look out for fakes and things on eBay, because there's all sorts of people trying to get you. Oh yes, RPGs. The games that tend to command the most prices, especially on the Super Nintendo and Nintendo systems, tend to be the RPGs. Now, the like stuff like Final Fantasy 3, the Castlevanias, that's not an RPG, but anyway, that's just quite an expensive title. The Square Enix line of games, the Final Fantasies, your Secret of Manas, stuff like that, Dragon Quests, they command ridiculous prices. Now, of course, there's not really much you can do in terms of those prices if you want the original complete in box, but it's nice to have them complete in box. Like those easily go for £100 plus, easily, for a good complete in box copy of any of those games. You can easily pay that and above. So probably if you're really looking to collect those games, probably the best thing to do is collect those, like only collect one of those like maybe every couple of months or so, because just because they're so cost prohibitive. I tend to go for ones like bulk buys, job lots. That's another good tip. If you see a job lot of games, like even loose cartridges and manuals, snap them up. Because even if it's a game or a bunch of games that you already have already, any duplicates, don't forget, you can always sell them on. If some people just like to just get rid of their stock because they just don't want them in them, just put them all on eBay, whack them on in various conditions or whatever, and just grab what you can, sell them, and for a low price, and just grab them. If you can get a decent price for them, and then basically any duplicates, you grab all the new ones you've got, put them on the shelf, and then the duplicates you've got, just I can sell that. Oh, I can combine that one, and basically you're trying to recreate complete in box games if you can from the bits that you've just acquired. So, for example, you might have a manual from another listing, you might have a cartridge from another listing, you might have a box from another listing, and pair them all up basically, and put them on your shelf, and there you are. So that's another way of doing it, job lots, and you can always sell on the duplicates that you don't need. That's another good way of recuperating some of your costs, of course, because people still you're still catering to the people that just want the carts only or the discs only, of course, because not everyone has the wishes to fork out the extra quite a bit of money just for the sake of having the complete in-box copy with the manual. But that's my personal opinion anyway. I'm a complete in-box kind of collector, but I understand that it's quite a slow process because of the amount of money it takes to get these games in complete in-box up sometimes, and it requires a lot of patience depending on what game you're looking for and what have you. And I tend to go for the games that I'm actually going to play. Like the next one I'm going to try and get is a copy of Mario Party 1 on the N64. No, sorry, not Mario Party, but that is another one. Paper Mario on the N64. Now, that is expensive in complete in box. That's about... Current average price is about £150 for a PAL copy. I can get an NTSC copy if I really wanted to, but then again, I'm collecting from... at the moment, I'm just working on PAL games mainly, and I don't have the means to play the cartridge anyway. I don't yet have an EverDrive or a flash card from N64 yet at the moment, so if I wanted to play it, it'd have to be a PAL cartridge. So until I get a NTSC, like a means of playing NTSC ROMs on my hardware or the cartridges, I'm not going to collect those at the moment. Of course, there are a few games that were released in America. Like I want to get Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. That's a different game entirely. The Infernal Machine on N64. That was never released over here in the UK. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, they cancelled it at the last minute, and the only way to get it is the NTSC version. And that's about, last time I checked, I think it was about £100 complete in box. So that's not exactly a Cheap game either, but that's another one I want to actually get because that's a good game. Going for complete in box collections is quite cost prohibitive in a lot of scenarios. As I say, it depends what kind of collection you're going for. Flash carts is an option for if you want to like play ROMs that you don't have yet but you are looking into get. And so if you want to keep your collection pristine, you just use your flash cart. That's one way of doing it. But so yeah, that's why I tend to quite like them flash carts. I don't have the means to test it out yet, this SD to SNES yet, because my Super Nintendo is currently being modded so it can run NTSC speed ROMs, which, you know, the 60 to 50 hertz conversion. You can tell it to like change the speed on the fly, so it'll run the American cartridges at the correct speed and the PAL cartridges at the correct speed. Because PAL games run at 50 hertz, and NTSC from America and Japan, those games run at 60 hertz. That's why a lot of people tend to say the American version of Sonic the Hedgehog is superior to the PAL version simply because it runs faster. And in most cases, it's around, I think it's about 20% faster than the PAL equivalent. So that's why a lot of people tend to prefer the NTSC cartridges and versions of games simply because of the speed increase. But that's not really a thing anymore. All games run at one speed these days, and all televisions are pretty much happy of running all frequency speeds anyway, so it's not really a problem anymore. The 60 to 50 hertz thing is not really an issue anymore really these days. It's all one standard, one speed, just region locking. That's basically it really. But other than that, all the games from all regions are identical these days really, which is a good thing. So that's not really a thing you have to consider. But like in retro games, it's definitely a thing you want to look into. What sort of, like, do you want PAL versions of do you want a PAL collection, or do you want an NTSC collection? As again, that's another decision you got to make. Some people might want to have a bit of a mix and match, like just because like if one version is cheaper from another region, get it from there, whatever, you know. And yes. But yeah, game collecting is quite good fun, and I actually intend to collect the games and actually play them. That's why I like them, and like if anyone wants to come around and play some Super Nintendo games or N64 games, like I've got the original cartridge just to use that if I want to. But I will get an EverDrive at some point, but not just yet, because I've spent quite a bit on that SD to SNES. Probably another couple of months before I save up for that. Another one of those yet, but it's definitely worth it looking into flash carts if you're into your collecting, video game collecting, because it's an alternative just to keep your cartridges nice and neat. Another thing you've also got to keep in mind is with how you're going to store everything. Now, for example, if you've got a lot of games like cases and boxes and what have you, you got to think of where you're going to keep them. Are you going to keep them on a shelf? Are you going to keep them stacked or whatever? The way I've got it is I've currently got them all, my boxes standing upright, so I can just like grab them off the shelf and like that, and there's no weight. The trouble is if you stack them like this, like one on top of the other, yes, you do save room, but like you've got the extra weight, and the one at the bottom like gets squished a bit more. And like I want to, if the idea is to preserve your boxes as best as they can be, then it's best to not stack them like that. It's best to have them upright, and even better if you've got the money, get some protectors for the boxes themselves. So they're basically plastic covers you can get for them. I will get some myself, but I haven't really looked into it yet, really. And like I want to see if I can find like a bulk buying, just get a bunch of them and get all my boxes all protected. But as I say, a lot of my boxes are in varying conditions anyway. Some of them are a bit tatty anyway, like just because like when I was younger I didn't really used to take care of my games, unfortunately, that well. But some of them are in really good condition, some of them are a bit like hit and miss. But personally, condition for me, as long as the game works, I'm okay. If the box is a bit tatty and the manual's a bit tatty, then I'm okay with it, really. I don't care, because it's still the original packaging. Even if it is a bit battered or dog-eared, I'll still take it. If I save a few quid, then I'm happy. But again, condition's another thing to look into. You have to weigh up, like, personally in your own terms, like, is it worth like spending, like, I don't know, extra 30-40 quid for the same box copy of a game just because like the box is in a bit better condition than the other ones, say, you know? If it's still the structural integrity of the box is still in pretty decent shape, like this one's in a pretty decent shape actually, this copy of Mario Kart Super Circuit, I should say. It's in pretty decent shape, other than the rip at the back, but like structurally it's sound, it stands up on its own quite nicely. And that's in decent shape actually. This is the spare box actually. I need to get like see if I can source a spare cartridge for this one and sell it on, because this is a spare box. This is probably my brother's box or my box, I'm not sure, but like he hasn't played his GBA stuff in ages. But all the boxes I could source, I've put them all over there, completed them with the manuals, put them all over there on the shelf, and they're all on display, and I can grab them and play them whenever I want. But we'll try and then I'll sell this spare one on to someone else who actually wants it. It's a shame just to have like a box and manual with no cartridge in it. But that's for another time. That's in my to-do bag, as it were, like my recycle bag. See if I can cobble together like extra, like new copies of games and stuff and what have you. So yeah. I think that's all I really want to say really about collecting. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope I haven't bored you to tears and whatever. Hopefully you've got some decent pointers from me. I will be back sometime next week. I might record another one in the week and then do a side. See, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll try and do a vlog at least once a week and do different topics and what have you. But today is about video game collection. I might talk a little bit more about it in another video, but we shall see. But again, thank you very much for listening to me. I'll see you guys next time.